Hi, everyone. My name is Madison from Master of Project Academy. We are here with Alan, and Alan is one of our thousands of PMP students, and he just recently passed his exam. Today, we're going to talk to him a little bit about his certification journey. So first of all, Alan, congrats, and thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it and excited to dive in. So to kick it off, could you just share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what's your current job?
Well, I'm currently from Las Vegas. I moved here from Houston, Texas about 5 years ago. I work for MGM Resorts in the corporate office as a senior financial projects manager. And that's really about it for now. I guess it's important to mention that I'm in college right now doing my residency at GCU.
Exciting. That's wonderful. And you've been in the project management game for quite some time,
I
right?
have, I have. I started out doing projects that I didn't really know were projects when you really think about it. It's just you're on these teams and, you're a stakeholder in the project and it's one of those things that you're involved in as an end user for a year or so. And, you realize that you're in this big, massive project. And then my career started going in the direction of more managing accounting functions rather than being an accountant. So I've definitely been working in project management for years now. So
Awesome. Awesome. So to kick it off, let's get to the exam nitty gritty. How long did it take for you to study for the PMP exam, this newest one?
wow. So that was a great experience. When I finally decided that I wanted to get my PMP, I locked myself into it. I said, okay, I'm going to buy the software. So I went to Master of Project Academy and I bought the software. And I said, I'm going to finish it by the end of 2020. So with the pandemic coming, things changed. The ways of working at my job changed. Things at home changed. How I was attending college changed. So I didn't get to it in 2020. So I would say I started really focusing on it in around May. But I had to postpone it because I wanted to do it in December. And I didn't feel like I was ready because I didn't have the time to commit to it. So in January, I kicked it into high gear and started studying and studying more. And in February, I took the exam on the first try and passed it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
So January, what did your study schedule look like? Were you at it every day? Are you better in the evenings, in the morning?
I studied after work. So I was doing at least an hour a day. That was my goal. I was like, I took the 35-hour package. So I was like, if I do this an hour a day and then save myself some time to take the pretest and study and just do some additional research that, keep practicing. I felt like by the time I got to February, I would be at the comfort level that I really wanted to be at when I took the exam.
Sure. Great. And, every 3 to 5 years, they change up the exam and they update it to make it a little bit more modern. So you are one of our first students who's taken the new exam. So I'm sure a lot of people are curious about it. How were the questions? Were they primarily agile, situational focused?
Well, that was the kicker. It was almost, I would say 95% of it was agile. There were a lot of business questions. It was all scenario based. And again, I guess that was a part that I wasn't really prepared for as well. That I didn't expect every question to be scenario based. So it took a little time to read the questions and get through it. But I thought in the end, it made a lot of sense because project management is primarily, at least from my perspective, is managing stakeholders. And when those different situations that you get into and how to address every stakeholder group from the vice president to the CEO to the end user who's mostly impacted by these changes, those situations made a lot of sense. So I could relate to a lot of them. So that helped when I had to answer those type of questions.
Sure, I bet, especially with the experience you have going into the test itself. I'm sure you could think of dozens of those
Mhm.
stakeholder situations to kind of tap into.
Yeah, certainly.
Great. So what was one of the biggest challenges when preparing for the exam itself?
Time. I would just say time. being a college student studying for my doctorate, the demands of work, demands on family, trying to keep everything going in a pandemic environment. It's really been tasking on my available time. So that was the biggest challenge. But it was one of those things you just have to commit to it. You got to say, I think I went the easiest route, really. I said, I'm going to take the 35-hour package. It's filled with information. It didn't leave any stone unturned. So once I knew I was able to go through that, and I went through it with comfort, and I took the practice exams and I took them over and over again, I felt like when I got to the exam, um, after the first 10 questions, I took a big sigh of relief because I was like, I know it. I know this stuff. So I felt like I was really confident in answering my questions. So that
That's great.
that strategy kind of worked out for me.
Absolutely. And I think being able to acknowledge your environment and your availability and the resources that you have and being realistic about that's really important. So you had this idea in 2020 to take the exam, but you took stock of what was happening around you and if you'd be able to really show up and do it justice, so that you could pass on the first, take of it. So I think hats off to you for being able to realize that as well, because I think sometimes, yeah, you put the pressure on and you're like, I'm doing it now, and then you're not setting yourself up for success. So time is really important to be successful at the end of it.
Yes, I couldn't agree. It was a self-disappointment to myself when I said, I need to push this back. But at the end of the day, I said, it's no rush. I wanted to get it. It was a personal goal of mine to get it in 2020. But I said, you know what? I'm going to re-baseline my goal and push this into the first quarter of 2021. I kind of made it my New Year's resolution, and I held myself to that. So, word of advice, if you have to give yourself more time, take that time. So when you get to the test, you feel comfortable. You don't feel like you just needed to meet that deadline. Feel comfortable with taking that exam before you get there.
That's great. And how is the quality of Master of Project Academy's training materials? What did you think?
I thought it was excellent. When I went through it, I guess my biggest concern, I'll tell you, was I was wondering if the program that I bought in 2020 was going to reflect the changes in 2021. And it did. It had all of the stuff in there about Agile. So I really focused on that at the end. I said, this is what I think I need to cover. I was doing some research, and a lot of the feedback on people who took the exams had really emphasized that that was a critical piece of the testing. It was in the package. I believe you guys updated it somewhere in between. So I noticed that it was there when it wasn't there before. So I really focused on it. It had very good material, and all of it was relatable to the exam. So I felt like I was very prepared when I took that exam. And it was very thankful that you guys made those updates, because that's where the time was at on the exam, was really focused on Agile and business processes. It was important to the test.
Great. Awesome. And you've already said that you've taken many, many pre-exams before the actual thing, but how many sample questions did you actually work through before the exam, if you had to put an estimate to it?
Throughout uh, the curriculum that you provide, there was always a test at the end. So I really studied those. And I took them, and when I didn't do so good, I took them again. My goal was always to at least get to 80% when I did those. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, that when I first started out, I was getting like 50s. I was like, no, you need to go back through this material. And I went back through it again and made sure I really had a good comprehending of what I was reading. And I got to those 80s and 90%, and I just moved along. And then when I got through the end of the course, I went back to those areas where I thought, this is probably where I'm weakest. And I restudied those, and I took the practice exams. So I really taking those exams after you go through the material, you read through everything, you listen to all the videos, I think really honed it in. And it made it for a more rounded experience of learning.
Comes down to that discipline of like, am I okay with the 75% or am I going to be hard on that 80% pass rate? So that's good. You really went back and went through that process. Obviously, it worked in your favor. How was the support you received from us throughout the PMP journey from start to finish?
I asked a lot of questions. I sent out emails. I got very good response. I felt it was informative. Um, I know that a lot of people were asking questions like after, there's a section where you can kind of do Q&A and someone from your team would respond to those. So there was some collaboration there that I thought was effective. I read through those. There were some good questions asked. So I thought that the support on the other end with you guys at Master of Project Academy was very well. I was happy that you had that kind of support there.
Great. That's great. And do you have any tips for people for the actual exam day itself? How to set yourself up for success?
Yes, I do have. There was one huge takeaway that I learned, and I'll tell you, it was probably the most difficult part of the exam for me, is not realizing at the first question that these were really going to be scenario based. They were very wordy questions. So I was taking way too much time reading through the questions because I wanted to make sure I didn't, that one word that changes the whole question for you. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing it. And then before I got to the first break, I had realized that I have been spending way too much time on each question. So I kind of calculated how many questions I had based on the time that I had. And I realized that I have to really pick up the pace or I'm not going to finish all these questions on time. So that was my biggest challenge, was I needed to go through the questions and not read it so much, looking for every little trick that I thought might be in there. I think when you read through it, read through the scenario, and when you look at the questions, I think it's, in many cases to me, it was pretty clear what those answers were. It really boiled down to one or two. I kind of eliminated process of elimination on the questions. And, I would look at two of them really hard before I answered one. So I think that made a really big impact on getting me through to the last question. Was really what my goal was halfway into it. It's like, I need to answer every question, so speed up.
Right. I was talking to another student and he had said that he thought he allotted time at the end of the exam to go back and double check answers. But all of a sudden it was ding, ding, time's up. And so it goes by faster than you think.
It absolutely does. I was checking like, oh, go back and review this so I can double check it. Excuse me. By the time I got there was not enough time. I just had to kind of hope that I got them right. And
right.
so yeah, time was definitely not on my side. So I would advise anyone to make sure that you pace yourself. I believe I think if you did it right, it was somewhere around 2 minutes per question, which really sounds like a lot, but it's not when you're really having to read through those scenarios.
Right, right. And you kind of already shared a bit of wisdom with same theme, time, and to not put so much pressure on yourself for when you need to take the exam. But do you have any other words of wisdom or suggestions for future candidates considering going through the certification process?
Yes, I would say don't be so fearful of the exam. I know it's critical to pass it, but if you have experience in project management, I think what you're going to realize is you know more than you realize. And I think when you study the material, you get your basic understanding down, which is important. You need to know it. But when you combine that with your experience, I think taking the exam will be a lot easier than you might think it is.
That's great. And then finally, Alan, how likely is it that you would recommend Master of Project Academy to a friend or a colleague?
I would highly recommend Master Academy for preparing yourself for the PMP. I felt like it was my one source to get the material that I needed. I didn't see a need to explore too much beyond the package that I purchased. And when I got to the end of the exam, I felt like, wow, I did it. I did everything right. And it was really based on the curriculum that you guys provided. So I would say it's highly recommended to go with your program because it's got all the material there and you guys do keep it up to date.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your certification journey, or does that pretty much cover it?
It pretty much covers it. I will tell you that it was a lot of celebration at work. It's something that my employer is kind of emphasizing that people who work on projects now, they want to see that certification. And I noticed when they're hiring people, it's one of those things that it's in that box where it says preferred. You don't have to have it all the time, but it's preferred that you do. But when you get within the organization, it's something within the culture that, hey, we want you to have this certification because, you're working on multi-million-dollar projects and having those credentials lets us know that you know what you're doing, and it gives people around you the confidence that you have that expertise. So it is something that's highly sought out. A lot of companies are managing projects of all types of sizes these days. So having that PMP is I think it's going to be a win for your profession.
Awesome. Great, great last piece of just, yeah, confidence and excitement around it. So thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate your time today, and congrats again.
Thank you. My pleasure.